Today, we're diving into one of the world's most ancient religions, Jainism. Now, when you hear the word conqueror, you might think of armies and empires. But this path isn't about conquering the world outside. It's about an internal battle, a journey to conquer something much closer to home, yourself.
So what does that actually mean, to conquer yourself? This isn't just some abstract philosophical question. For Jains, it's the absolute central purpose of life.
All right, let's get into it. The answer to that question is kind of hidden in plain sight, right in the name of the religion itself. It all boils down to one powerful word from Sanskrit. That word is Jina. It literally means a conqueror. But like we said, a Jina doesn't conquer lands or people. A Jina is a human being who has totally mastered their own inner world. We're talking about things like anger, greed, ego, desire. And the people who follow this path, the one laid out by these conquerors, they're called Jainins.
But why? Why take on such a massive internal challenge? Well, the end game is something called moksha. This is the ultimate goal, the complete liberation of the soul from that endless cycle of birth and death, freeing it from all the karmic baggage it's picked up along the way.
Jains have this really amazing way of looking at the soul and karma. Think of your soul as pure, shimmering gold. In its natural state, it has infinite knowledge, infinite bliss, infinite energy. But, through our actions and our passions, it gets all mixed up with these impurities, which Jains call karma. This karma clouds the soul's true, brilliant nature. So the entire Jain path is really a process of purifying that gold, getting the soul back to its perfect original state.
Okay, so how do you even begin this purification process? Well, the whole journey is guided by three great pillars, three core principles of Jain philosophy.
These are the big three. Ahimsa, which is nonviolence, Anekantavada, or non-absolutism, and Aparigraha, or non-possessiveness. Let's break down what each of these really means, because they're pretty profound.
First up, and probably the most famous, is Ahimsa. This is the absolute supreme principle in Jainism. It's a deep, deep commitment to nonviolence and non-injury, and not just in your actions, but in your thoughts and your words too. This symbol just perfectly captures the idea of Ahimsa. The hand gesture means stop, a clear signal to halt violence. And the wheel in the palm? That's the Dharma chakra, and it represents the resolve to break that endless cycle of reincarnation or samsara by sticking to this path of nonviolence. And when Jains talk about nonviolence, they take it to a whole other level. It's not just about people and animals. They recognize this whole hierarchy of life, and the principle extends to every single being, insects, plants, even microscopic life forms you can't even see. Every single action carries karmic weight. This is why Jains are strictly vegetarian or vegan, and why some monks and nuns will gently sweep the path in front of them just to avoid harming even the tiniest creatures.
The second pillar is Anekantavada, which is the principle of non-absolutism. It's this really radical idea that reality is just so complex and has so many different sides that no single viewpoint could ever capture the entire truth. It's basically a philosophical commitment to being incredibly open-minded.
The best way to get this is through that classic parable of the blind men and the elephant. You know the one, right? Each man touches a different part of the elephant. One feels the trunk and says it's a snake. Another feels the leg and says it's a tree trunk. The thing is, each of their perspectives is true, from their limited point of view. But none of them gets the whole picture of what an elephant really is. Anekantavada teaches us that we have to respect all those different viewpoints to even get close to the full truth.
And the third pillar is Aparigraha, or non-possessiveness. Now, this isn't just about owning a few things. It's about a deep non-attachment to the things you do have. The Jain belief is that when you have this unchecked desire for more stuff, it always leads to greed and jealousy, and in the end, harm and violence. Okay, so we've got these three huge ideas: nonviolence, non-absolutism, and non-possessiveness. But how do you actually translate that into a code you can live by every single day? Well, that's where the 5 mean vows, or vratas, come in. This is the practical framework, the playbook that guides the life of every Jain, whether they're a monk who has renounced the world or just a regular person living a family life. So these 5 vows are where the rubber really meets the road. First up, no surprise, is Ahimsa, nonviolence. Then there's Satya, which is all about truthfulness. Asteya means not stealing, but it also means not taking anything that isn't freely given. Then you have Brahmacharya, which is chastity or celibacy, a vow of self-control. And finally, there it is again, Aparigraha, non-possessiveness. Now, the level of commitment to these vows can be different. Monks and nuns live this incredibly austere life, practicing these vows to their absolute most extreme limit. They renounce all possessions, all social ties, everything. On the other hand, you have the lay followers, who observe the very same vows but adapt them to the practical realities of having a job and a family in the real world.
All right, so we've talked about the individual path. Now let's zoom way out and see how all of this fits into the grand Jain cosmology, their view of the universe and time itself.
So in the Jain worldview, the universe is eternal. It was never created by some divine being, and it will never be destroyed. It just is. It's this huge, self-sustaining system that's divided into 3 realms: an upper world for heavenly beings, our middle world where humans and animals live, and a lower world of suffering.
And time isn't a straight line. It's much more like a gigantic, ceaselessly turning wheel called the Kala Chakra. You can think of it as having 2 halves. There's an upward swing called the Utsarpani, where happiness and goodness are on the rise. And then there's a downward swing, the Avasarpani, where things decay, leading to more sorrow and immorality.
Each half of that cosmic wheel is split into 6 eras. And during our current downward swing, we've moved from ages of great happiness into ages of increasing sorrow. And here's the kicker. Jains believe we are right now in the 5th era, Dukkha Ma, an age of sorrow with very little happiness. This whole cosmic view really helps to explain the state of the world and why the spiritual path is so urgent.
You know, even though Jainism is a relatively small religion today in terms of numbers, its ancient roots have had this incredibly deep and lasting influence, reaching far beyond its own community.
And one of the most powerful examples of this for sure is its influence on Mahatma Gandhi. He was deeply moved by the Jain principles of Ahimsa, nonviolence, and Anekantavada, that idea of multiple viewpoints. These ancient concepts actually became cornerstones of his entire philosophy of religious tolerance and nonviolent resistance, which literally changed the course of modern history.
And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. In our modern world, which so often feels defined by conflict, by rigid thinking and materialism, what can we learn from a spiritual path that champions radical nonviolence, the acceptance of multiple truths, and the real freedom that comes from non-attachment? It's a pretty powerful question, worth thinking about.